Hello, it's me again, Anastasia and Dream and Draw Art School. In this video, we are going to do the most interesting part, watercolor practice. If you know the rules, it is so easy to get acquainted with this material. So, in this video, I'll show you some useful exercises and you will better understand it. Let's begin.
At the very beginning, before using the watercolor, we need to add a couple of water drops in each pan of paint. Just take some water on the brush and add to each pan. After that, it is easier to pick up the watercolor on the brush and the color is much brighter. You also need to add a little bit of water to the palette so it will be easier to mix the colors. And of course, for these exercises, we'll need the watercolor paper. Look at the paper. Sometimes one side of the paper has a texture and other side does not. We always draw on the textured side, but sometimes the paper has texture on both sides. For example, like Fabriano paper I use. It is two-sided, so you can draw on any side you want. But if you have the other paper, just choose the textured side and draw on it. The first important thing you need to know about the watercolor is how much water your brush can take. The whole thing about watercolor painting is to understand the right proportion of water and paint on the brush. Now let's make 3 swatches. The first swatch is when brush has little water. I dip the brush into the water, then dry well with the paper towel, and then I take the paint directly from the pan without using the palette. The brush looks fine, its nib is really pointy, and when you apply it, it leaves rough traces on the paper, like this. You can clearly see the texture of the paper, and sometimes we need that effect for wooden or stone objects. And the effect is called dry brush. Okay, the second swatch will show you the brush with too much water. I dip the brush in the water, use no palette and go directly to the color pan. The brush is not that pointy and looks bolder. This time there is too much of water on the brush because I haven't used the paper towel and haven't used the palette as well. This kind of swatches can lead to watercolor blots that most beginners hate, and sometimes it will look not that good when dry. But sometimes we also need this effect. Later I'll show you exactly where and how. And now an ideal version of swatch looks like this. We dip brush into the water, then dry it a bit with the edge of the glass of water like this. Then take the color from the pan and then mix the color with the water on the palette. You do remember we've prepared some water on the palette, right? If we want more saturated color, we take more paint from the pan and add a bit of water and mix together on the palette. The brush is also pointy, but it has the right proportion of water and paint. This kind of swatch we usually use mostly for every technique in watercolor sketching. So let me show you where exactly I use each type of swatches. Here on the poppy petals I've used the dry brush for creating veins. This technique is so good for textures and looks so great. Remember that you can create wood, stone texture or leaves with this dry brush effect. In this sketch, I've used the second swatch with loads of water so the shadows look very airy, light and gentle. And when I need to cover the space with a nice and clean background, I use the third type of swatches, like this. The whole space has no rough edges, the watercolor flows and mixes smoothly on the paper. All of the swatches we will use in my art lessons in different sketches. I'm sure you will learn them easily. By the way, you see that the second swatch is still wet, and sometimes we need to take the extra water away with the brush. Just apply your brush on the wet area and it will absorb the extra water and paint. Then clean the brush with paper towel and repeat. Or we can use the paper towel itself. Gently touch the wet area and the towel will also absorb all the extra water. For the second practice, we need the watercolor paper of A5 size and divide it into 6 parts like this. Don't forget to prepare the paints, just add a bit of water in each pan. We're going to do several washes, and for the first one I take yellow and mix the paint with water on the palette, like this. So the paint is ready and we take as much of the watercolor as we can on our brush and try to make the clear wash on this section. Just apply the brush on the paper and make one stroke. Then you see that there are some drops of watercolor on the edge of this section. These drops are very important if you want to make a clear, nice wash. Then we take a bit more of the paint from the palette and make the other strokes just by dragging these dots down with our brush. So you see, the drops helps us to make the clear wash without any sharp edges. So I continue using the brush, using the paper from the palette and trying to use these drops of watercolor. So the wash is great. Try to make several washes in different colors. In the second section, we will do a smooth transition from one color to another. I will also use the yellow color and a bit of green. I like the emerald green or phthalo green color, so let's use it. The first color will be yellow, so take the paint on the brush, mix it with the water on palette. Make some strokes using the drops of water, drag them down and make the wash right until the middle of the section, like this. Then prepare some yellow dots in the bottom of the yellow section, of the yellow wash. Then take the green color, also make one stroke, and then drag the watercolor on top using your brush and leave some white paper between these two colors. Then again take yellow color and mix these colors together right in the middle of the section and move to the bottom of the green section. Try to practice this transition because it is great, it looks so beautiful. And if you have the extra water somewhere on your wash, just use your brush to take the extra water or watercolor away from the paper, like this. Okay, so for the next section, take the orange color or any other color you have or you want. Mix the color together with the water on the palette. So you see the color is very bright. Make the first stroke like this and try to move with your brush. Also make some drops of watercolor on the edge of this wash. Then take some water from your water glass and dry your brush a bit with the edge of the glass like this. And then make the stroke with the water only on your wash. You see the wash became lighter. That's the effect we need. Then you take more water and again you dry your brush again with the edge of the glass, and make another stroke until the wash became really light like the paper white. So you see we made the transition from the bright color to white color of paper. The next wash is also very interesting and I'm going to take the violet color for it. I take the violet, mix it with the water on the palette, and then I'm making one stroke without picking the brush up from the paper. You see? No interruption, no picking up, just the wash with one movement. And I'm only pressing the brush down. That's all, try to do it as well. We need to let this wash dry and then I will show you another technique of stamping. And the last section is going to be the wet on wet technique, the wet on wet wash. Just prepare the section with your brush and only watercolor. Cover the section with water and try to pick any color you want. For example, I will start with the yellow and just make some dots, strokes on the wet paper with yellow. You can see how the watercolor flows. I like this effect very much. Then you can take another color, for example orange, and add some dots of orange on the wet paper. Now you can play with it, add a bit of more yellow or any other color and see how the watercolor flows. I will also add a bit of green color of that bright emerald green. So you see how the green is looking now on the wet paper. And of course, if you have some extra water on your wash, on the edge of your wash, try to remove it with your brush. So the violet wash is dry. Let's try the stamping technique. Take the wet brush and start to move it side to side to remove a bit of paint from the edge of this wash. Just be careful, do not press too hard, it can spoil the paper, leaving some peeled off pieces. Move the brush gently and wipe it up with the paper towel. Practice on the other edges of this wash. This technique is very useful for shadows, for layering and for flowers drawing. Okay, so we have one more section left and you can use it to practice any of these washes.
Be sure to make these exercises, especially if you are a beginner and if something doesn't work well. So practice and see you in the next video.